my favorite movie of all time is Hot Fuzz.
What the fuck is he on about?
Just kidding, it's Apocalypse Now.
What do you know about film? Major, you're goddamn
Massachusetts.
Kidding. I don't actually have a favorite movie. I stand by this ideology of having a sporadic clump of 10 apex films. Here's the list, by the way. But End of Evangelion is absolutely my favorite animated movie, and bar none, my favorite anime. Like, I hold End of Eva and Neon Genesis Eva on two completely separate tiers, despite the fact that the movie is a direct continuation of the show. This shit is legitimate work of art in every sense of the word. In every sense of media production, this is fucking art. In every sense of animation, this is fucking art. And all of it happened in 1997, the same year I was born. Shit is like goddamn motherfucking Stanley Kubrick made a cartoon. And just to elaborate upon that, Akira's Tarantino, Ghost in the Shell is Scorsese, and Ghibli is Spielberg. I'd recommend watching these videos before we dive into this one. They're good prepping material for my mentality, and they'll make a lot of what I say more digestible if you're new to film study. I'm not just saying that because I want a higher view count and audience retention. I'm genuinely saying that because these will be helpful when you're going into this video. I'm also going to be breaking my analysis of End of Eva into two halves. The first half covering the action segment of the movie, and the second covering the mental tour de force, aka Shinji's mindfuck. Mostly going to do this because judging by the page lengths of my write-ups, I have way too much to say about both halves of this movie. Now as for the first half, shit is like a master course on the immersive cinematic experience. And that's a hell of a feat for a traditionally animated film. You really don't see many of these, and they are my favorite thing. Oh, did I mention fuck this movie's English dub? Because despite what a lot of people will tell you, fuck this movie's English dub. So this rant about
Voice acting.
thing that I do for about like 5 minutes is completely irrelevant now because Netflix redubbed the entire film. The main actors do in fact do a good job in their performances. The director was actually very good friends with them, and she did an amazing job of, well, directing them.
I knew Jimmy would pay top dollar to get that stupid doll back.
Every single missile hit the target!
But man, it's not the main actors who are the problem. It's all the secondary characters, it's the script. It's all these weird post-production things they decided to implement. When Misato's explaining Seilei's intent and the origin of Second Impact to Shinji, everything's going well, until a sudden mistranslation.
Mankind was spawned from a being called Lilith, just like Adam was.
This is actually incorrect. Although within canon humans were in fact born from Lilith, Adam was not. Adam is its own thing entirely and was actually the seed of life that created the other angels. A more accurate translation would be something to the tune of, mankind was spawned from a being akin to Adam, known as Lilith. Credit to Ava Monkey for that one. The JSDF soldiers sound stupid as hell.
Showtime, ladies. All units move out.
Like, this dude's having the time of his fucking life putting a gun to Shinji's head.
You've located the third child. Commencing termination. Sorry, kid. Nothing personal.
The Japanese one has audible regret. Less like he's super relaxed about murder and more like he's apathetic about what his job is. The Nerve Bridge crew has this one dorky white dude voiced by a black dude with a deep voice.
Damn! Haven't you ever heard of moderation?
Under the original production management, this character was voiced by the ADR director of Eva, so this could have been a jab at him.
Free of what?
It's kind of fucking petty, but okay.
I wish those bastards felt the same way.
Oh, did I mention the screaming? Because, like, the Japanese ones are like the sounds of actual pain and suffering, and that is legitimately terrifying. The English ones are okay sometimes. You know, for the main cast. But compare this scene where these soldiers are emotionlessly and mercilessly burning an off-screen woman alive. Now compare that to these two dude bros barbecuing Tarzan over here. I mean, there's seriously no comparison unless you want to make this into a comedy movie. The Japanese one's fucking terrifying. Hey, you know, if we're gonna make our English dub a cartoon, let's add a bunch of cartoon sound effects. This is only in the dub track. This is real. I did not edit this in. It was in the wrong fucking audio channel too, did you hear that? Like the gunshots coming from the right side of the room on the right speaker, and the splats coming from the left side of the room on the left speaker. Did you know that sound effect is actually in John Carpenter's The Thing? Like, this whole scene is great, it has an amazing practical effect in it, but as soon as you notice that sound, it almost sort of ruins the mood of it. You know, like how it ruins this violent and dark moment from a typically lighthearted character. Does voice acting count as a sound effect? Sometimes, if it's used for tone or atmosphere. On that note, the sound of giant naked God Ray moaning as her hand passes through Maya is actually absent from the dub. That's sorely missed. I legit get fucking chills from that. Also, it makes you feel a lot more engaged with Maya when she's freaking the fuck out. When Gendo's voice cuts out here, that was actually due to an audio error in the original recording. The silence had a lot of weight to it with the interpretational aspect, so it was left in that way. Due to that, the English dub doesn't really hold the same weight, as it's delivered like a play script, where he's waiting to be cut off. Like it was written and delivered as, the truth is, dash. I mean, honestly, this one's such a fucking nitpick. I actually do like Gendo's dub actor. By the way, the line blanked out is most likely, I needed you. The lip movements match the Japanese for that, and Ritsuko types it on the computer during instrumentality. She's also a character who throughout the entire show has had the motivation of wanting to be needed. Speaking of directorial decisions, the line how disgusting in the Japanese version actually comes from a place of real, well, disgust. Asuka's VA wasn't bringing the exact feeling Hideki Anno wanted to the table. So he described the scenario to her to the tune of, Miyamura.
Just imagine you are sleeping in your bed, and a stranger sneaks into your room.
He can rape you at any time as you're asleep.
But he doesn't. Instead, he masturbates, looking at you.
When you wake up and know what he did to you.
What do you think you would say?
Asuka's VA replied with a very genuine, which phrasing-wise has a broad interpretation, but the one with the most bite is how disgusting. And that completely improvised, genuine take of her saying that is what made it into the film. I also heard some stuff about Anno actually making Shinji's actress choke Asuka's to the point where she was really crying, but I can't verify that one. So you see why I compare Hideki Anno to Stanley Kubrick? So yeah, fuck the dub. And this is coming from someone who's usually a proprietor of dubs over subs. Oh shit, I got a little sidetracked there. I just remembered that tangent about voice acting was meant to be a preface to this amazing cinematic experience. A cinematic experience being an experience where the acting, the animation, the cinematography, the editing, music, and sound design all come together to form that perfect cinematic journey. One that is immersive, exciting, and beautiful. All of which is the result of amazing direction. I already went over the voice acting and how the raw and amazing performances are able to bridge the language gap with their emotional passion, so I'd say that's an easy transition to talking about some post-production audio stuff. Half of which is only present in the Japanese version. For starters, the dialogue and sound effects mixing is both precise and atmospheric. In our first interior shot of Nerve, it sounds like we're in a huge vacuum, and the 3 bridge crew members talking are mixed off to the right speaker, their voices echoing through the solidarity of the room. Character voices being mapped to an audio channel complementary to their location in a room is actually a very common thing in both the movie and the show. This really makes us subtly feel like we're present in the room, and the result is super immersive. As far as sound effects go, there is an intense level of detail paid to both the subtle and the extreme. Gunshots, explosions, roars, punches, all sound awesome. Like, especially the mass production Avas. When they're all circling around Asuka, they sound like demons from hell that are simultaneously crying and laughing. And that sound somehow manages to get even more chilling when it's compressed through the Nerve computer speaker. Speaking of compression, once again, I love the way radio filters sound. Something about that filtering is just like so cool to me. But how about some love for the little details, like the viscous sounds of the IV drip sloshing about as it rattles, the phone dial tone beeping as it swings off the cord. When this can rolls away, it rolls away into the proper speaker, once again making us feel like we're really there. The sound effects are mixed with as much precision as the voices. Eva often edits the sound effects as well, like here where Misato's car blinkers are quietly ticking, signifying the editing rhythm. The cars racing by in the background signify when to cut to the next shot. And hey, speaking of editing, let's talk about some of the stronger edits of the film. This one is one of my favorites. Later in the film, after Ritsuko dies, we see some masterclass shit in the way of properly pacing the mourning of a character's loss with the reemergence into an amazing action scene. After Ritsuko's shot and falls into the sea of LCL, we cut to a smashed coffee mug, an object symbolic of herself, her stress, and her drive to always work to please Gendo. We hold in silence on the smashed mug for just the right amount of time before we're snapped back into the action by juxtaposing a cut with the sound of a ricochet. Similarly, with the whole cutting the sound thing, same as I explained in my last video about this show's editing, action and pacing is often in rhythm with music. Like here, the background music is building as we break down the situation. Once Fuyutsuki says, "Just as I thought," the guitar cues in, signifying that with the confirmed assessment of Seilei's plan, the stakes have been risen, and that this is important. Sometimes character dialogue and sound effects can actually sub in for the scene's cutting momentum, similarly to some of the edits I mentioned earlier. When Maya shouts, "Why do they want Eva so badly?" we immediately cut to Misato explaining why. That is so on the nose. but it happens so fast that it does not in the slightest bit come off as hokey or jarring. There's often an ABC sort of rhythm with the pacing of the edits with movement. So as to keep our attention on a dialogue scene, we edit kind of like an action sequence, usually with a close-up of something that is in mid-motion, then easing to a calmer movement, also in mid-motion, and then to a more relaxed shot as the characters continue to talk. This makes exposition come off as less boring, as deceptively it starts out edited like, well, an action scene. It happens in a really cool way during this scene where Misato's talking to Hyuga and Maya over the phone. Cut the sound and movement as she sweeps the bob of her ponytail off. Then a close-up of her walking, and then a wide shot that is as cool as it is sexy. Best girl. I also think it's kind of cool that her footsteps are in sync to the music here. The flow of revealing information through editing is done in a really cool way here, in this scene where the JSDF are invading Nerve. Like, the way this is done is so fucking smart that it feels like it has to be done by an editor who's working with existing footage. But nope. It's just the director who knows his shit.
Let me explain.
In the first shot, location is established, along with the sounds of off-screen footsteps and the building music. The subsequent shot shows us the source of the footsteps being the invasion force, and the final shot shows us a dead security guard, blood spilling over the Nerve insignia. To break all this down, first we get location, then we get the character of focus, and then we get that character's intent, to spill the blood of Nerve. Like, see what I mean? From the perspective of a director, a sequence of shots like this would normally be something done in hindsight, like by an editor, maybe with some smart location planning by a cinematographer. But here, it's just done by one director, who is extremely proficient in all the above. So while I was editing, I noticed something particularly fucking awesome in terms of scene transitions with, like, natural foreground objects and editing. So, like, watch this real quick when it swipes between panning through the woods to the soldier putting the phone down. Okay, now watch it again in slow motion. That is fucking butter. That is the editing equivalent to butter. The invasion of Nerve itself is super frantic. Cuts are fast between constant slaughter and brutality, and the soldiers come off as proficient and brutal while Nerve seems completely helpless. A few shots were actually taken from a war movie Anna was a fan of. Oh hey, that last tangent actually had a lot to do with cinematography. Let's transition into talking about cinematography now, with this shot. Now, rightfully so, a lot of people give credit to The Last Jedi for making us really care about this random rebel. But brother, I'ma do you one better. How about instead of a long sequence of events, just one shot that is barely 10 seconds long that makes you feel all of those exact same emotions. Now, before I go into why this works so well, I'd like to establish the principle of scene hierarchy. This basically means that by breaking a shot down into simple shapes and using natural lines, we can draw focus to an object. When it comes to this, Jaws is king. In this scene, the predominant shape is that of Brody. Although the lines here aren't terribly gratuitous, we are using a very broad negative space, as well as placing less of a focus on the seemingly irrelevant Chum. That is, until Jaws pops up and takes up almost the entirety of the shot with the mere size of her. We're looking at a wicked smart and super classy jump scare here, my dudes. Now, back to End of Eva, take what I said and apply it to this shot. Same as usual, our attention has been captured with a close-up that's mid-motion in keeping with Anno's cutting philosophy. The main focus in the subsequent shot is this woman dragging a dead guy's body, crying as she does it, very nearly towards the edge of the screen. The natural diagonal lines of the shot draw our attention down the hall to what seems like an inconsequential background detail of soldiers passing her by. Now, we can affirm three things here right away. The first is that we've only seen armed security personnel die up to this point. Armed men. This is an unarmed, crying woman, basically serving the position of a medic or a widow. Those being contextual things that we'd see as innocent and salvageable in a basic war situation. The second is that in her very slow trudge to stage left, she's almost out of the shot. If she actually escapes off screen, we have a mental idea that the vague stage left would actually be her salvation. And finally, there's the soldiers. Similar to the Chum in Jaws, them running by her seems irrelevant. Amidst the chaos, they aren't focusing on her, and we aren't really focusing on them. Now, considering all the above, this unarmed, suffering woman should make it to the edge of the frame with her dead body here. The soldiers are ignoring her, and she's so close to being off screen, but oh, hello. This little shit just stopped. Thanks to perfect scene hierarchy, the soldiers never left our field of vision. Our attention is on her, but our peripheral was always on them. Again, same as Jaws. Then he shoots her. I actually feel so bad for this completely faceless, meaningless girl every time I see this movie. Like, they lay things out like she's going to have, like, almost a chance of making it, despite the fact that we never even see her face, and her pathetic situation makes it seem like she'd be such a worthless target, so... Like, this shot could totally just end with the soldiers continuing to pass her by. But nope, Gotta make him merciless as possible. It's actually right after this where we see the scene of them burning someone alive off screen. Also a woman. In the Japanese. In the dub, it's Tarzan. Fun fact, psychologically, we as an audience actually feel a lot more empathy towards women and children due to caveman-like instincts. Also pets, because they cute. Interestingly, this movie makes use of a shaky cam juxtaposed by quickly cutting between close-ups. It's frantic as hell, but effectively so. A lot of modern filmgoers complain about the overuse of shaky cam, but in situations like these where it's used sparingly, it's, again, super effective. Also, can I just note that this is an animated film and it's making use of a live-action-esque shaky cam? When is the last time you've seen a traditionally animated film effectively make use of a shaky cam? Scenes with Misato and Shinji speaking to each other are often positioned very far away, particularly when Shinji's speaking. This is both done to convey the distance between them by literally showing the distance between them, as well as making us feel like an onlooker, like we're watching a family fight, and we should feel dirty for watching this happen. Like it is none of our business what this dysfunctional surrogate family does. The fisheye lens here is meant to create a sense of foreboding and dread, which visually substitutes having dialogue saying the same thing. I also really like seeing legitimate camera lenses taken into account for animation. Another aspect of cinematography is color grading and lighting, which can be used to establish mood. One standout moment is when Misato is in this tech room in Nerve, everything is simplified to be green, red, and blue. Now, the blue and green tones are used to make the room look cold, but let's think complementary colors. Divergent to blue and green on the color wheel are orange and red, respectively. Therefore, all the light sources being red or reddish-orange draws our attention to that part of the screen, as well as making them look damn appealing. This is actually one of my favorite color combos. Likewise, in Misato's final goodbye to Shinji, the white light of the elevator contrasts the black of the room they're in, Shinji being saturated in white, as if he's ascending to a higher plane, while Misato is cast in darkness as death approaches. And the earlier discussed wide-shot composition theory is still ongoing. Like, again, this is still meant to be like us bearing witness to something awkward in like a different family that we aren't supposed to see. However, interestingly, in close-ups, shots of Shinji are shot from a higher angle, to show that he's beneath us as an audience, and that he's an emotional wreck and should be looked down upon as pathetic. Whereas Misato's at eye level, as we're on her side. Watching a limp-ass Shinji being slumped around to the point of her getting shot kinda fucking sucks. Man up, Shinji! I also wish Misato's final words to Shinji were more effective. We're literally getting a better therapy session than the actual last 2 episodes of the show's therapy session. Now, with their last goodbye, we once again see a perfect harmonization of editing and cinematography. Shinji steps back and flails into the elevator. As he does, we enter a slow-mo effect, and the Foley sounds die down. We cut to Misato basked in light as we zoom out. Hold, and then the door slams shut in front of her. The sound effects re-emerging with the door shutting. This sequence is paced fucking amazingly. And then Darling and the Franks just kinda stole it and took away any of the contextual weight it had. The fucking hacks. Also, do I really need to spell out that Misato, like with the heavenly glow around her over darkness, is meant to imply that she's gonna die? I'd like to add a note about Shinji's voice acting here. When he slumps forward and cries, this isn't a regular, oh, I'm sad, my surrogate sister died kind of crying. This boy sounds like he's gonna fucking throw up. Also, to completely ruin the mood here, when Misato blows up, if you slow it down, you can see her body being shredded apart in the burst cloud. Oh, hey, this is an animated movie after all. Let me touch on animation. You know, like it's my job or something. Remember, guys, I'm an animator. Oh. Now, seeing as this is still Japanese animation, we're not going to get Disney-level fluidity, but the detail in the drawings is amazing, as well as the adherence to the 12 principles in such an effective and yet still cost-beneficial way. Like, drawing-wise, I always thought it was amazing how much effort they put into the detailing of the fleshier parts of the eye, as well as the eyelids around it. And also the gesture of the hands being so appealing and accurate. It's just great. Now, combining detail with amazing animation, guns are hard as shit to keep on model. Same with cars. But looky here, these incredibly talented Japanese fellas are just showing off. Now, without focusing on the amazing detail of the drawings, what really nails the fluidity and the movement of this is the timing and the spacing. Whew, okay. Time to explain what that means. Animation is normally done on 24 frames per second, meaning each second has 24 individual drawings in them. Japanese animation usually cuts this in half, choosing to draw every 3 or 4 frames instead of every single frame. This is able to work because 24 is divisible by 3 and 4. The end result spreads out evenly. Now that's timing. What spacing is essentially the definitive shape of each silhouette of each drawing. The spacing is the space between each of those drawings. To have each pose read really well as a key pose, idealistically you give them a very spacious silhouette compared to the prior frame. Well, gotta explain keyframes now, but that's easy. In animation, a key pose is the key position of movement. The breakdowns add character, precision, and depth to the movement. In-betweens are everything in between. Now, because I just laid out a bunch of technical shit with animation, watch this gun cocking again. Bearing in mind that this is using limited poses and only makes use of keys and breakdowns with little to no in-betweens. Now appreciate it in slow motion. This is smart as fuck, flows extremely well, and is the work of people who have mastered the art of movement. I'll say, how you like that bounce back on the top? That's squash and stretch, baby. But without actually squishing anything, though. You know, because a malleable pistol would look like super cartoony and break your immersion. You know, like the sound effects. But how the fuck could I talk about animation in the end of Evangelion without even touching on the Asuka fight? Because remember when I said that this is one of the most well-done fights in all of animation ever? Here's why, bitch! Now, all that shit I built up about animation, cinematography, sound, and editing, that wasn't for nothing, as all of this is used in an amazingly effective full force here. For starters, mood lighting. This entire first shot takes place underwater because the sound of the ocean is super calming, and the blue tint to the whole shot makes it feel comforting, yet still cold. Like, literally cold, and also emotionally cold. Which is almost contradictory to the fact that she's being bombed right now. However, these things with her whimpering voice and the camera slowly panning closer and closer to her, with her voice getting louder as we approach, fixates our anticipation and fear upon her. And right when we're starting to think hearing "I don't want to die" whispered into the mic is boring, we start to hear the voices in her head. Now, something that might not be clear here is she's actually not just remembering her mother, but the fact that her mother tried to kill her at a very young age. This is implied through the lines, "Die with me," and the sound of a young Asuka whimpering. If you've read the manga, they actually illustrate this, but likely take some creative liberties. As her insanity reaches its boiling point, we fast cut to a stuttering white with a lapse of disturbing images in her head. One of them actually being her dead corpse riddled with maggots. But next, something contradictorily pleasant happens. Her mother reaches out to her via the connection within the Eva, and Asuka comes to the realization that her mother never really grew distant from her, never abandoned her, never thought of her as a doll, because she was always there within her Eva, protecting her as an AT field. Now, something amazing about this fight is that similar to the shot of the gun I showed before, the timing and spacing is fucking perfect. There's also a really great use of the other 12 principles, most predominantly anticipation and arcs. Anticipation basically means what you assume it does, a split-second frame of action that builds to a reaction. Arcs basically mean the trajectory of the movement is done in a curve-like fashion, where the keys and the breakdown signify a more natural wave-like movement rather than a straight line between each key pose. Also, we have an extremely effective use of editing and shot choices to fully sell the scale and weight of the lumbering mass of Eva she's piloting, often cutting inside the cockpit to Asuka borderline struggling to get the Eva to lunge forward, which is then match cut to the outside of the Eva making that same movement. The camera often drags behind Unit 2 in the Eva series to give them a better sense of speed and force, as well as to really add to the extreme weight, like they're so fast and so heavy that our eye can't even follow it. We consistently cut to wide shots to give us a full sense of scale and perspective, then cut into close-ups of the ground being destroyed with the Eva smashing their feet into the earth. Also, oh my god, this shit is violent, and I love it! Quick note to further impress, this particular section of the fight is actually done with a straight-ahead animation method. Now usually, like I said, there are keys and breakdowns. An animator working pose to pose would draw each key and then each breakdown and then in between all those poses. Well, actually usually an intern or like a grunt man will in between all the poses and everything, but you know. But what's unique to straight ahead is that, like the name implies, the animator just drew every single pose as it happened, meaning no planning with the key poses. He just started drawing and let the flow of the movement be dictated strictly by how he felt. Now, before we get back to the fight, I'd like to quickly talk about Seilei's intentions. Some people might find their plans confusing, but that's because they're not inherently evil. The violent retaliation against Nerve and Asuka isn't necessarily them trying to be as cruel as possible, it's them doing what they feel is necessary, to put Nerve back in its place, and also to stop Gendo from realizing his own form of their plan, instrumentality, before they do. For starters, they initially just tried hacking into Nerve. This means they can preserve the Magi as a monument to humanity's existence, similar to Yui in Unit 1. It also would have granted them full control over the Nerve headquarters, meaning they could have enacted their plan however they wanted. The JSDF invasion was actually caused by them lying to the Japanese government and telling them that Nerve was planning instrumentality instead of Seilei. Thus, the Japanese government, an entire genocide of the whole world, should be met with extreme force. And the combat usage of the mass production Evas was something they never really wanted to do, so they had to drop them in before Unit 1 arrived to take care of her, at the risk of sacrificing a few. So again, it was never to be violent or inflict as much cruelty as possible, they even say this, but they're insane and are after the next stage of human evolution, doing everything within their power to obtain it before Gendo can. Okay, back to the fight again. I just wanted to clear that up because I've heard people call this shit a plot hole, and that's fucking stupid. And oh fuck, her scream is already chilling, but then you add the beep of the battery dying on top of that, and it's legitimately horrifying. Although a genuine complaint I have about this movie is that I think it's odd that Maya's almost vomiting from the side of a computer monitor. The idea is that she's supposed to be reacting to what we as an audience are seeing because she's meant to be our vessel, but in context she's basically seeing Half-Life 2.exe as stop responding over and over again. Ugh, actually, I'd vomit too if I saw that. But speaking of gross, Unit 2 jeering its eye up onto the impaled lance is fucking cringe-inducing just from the sight of it. I love that I hate it. Also, this shot of Asuka reaching up into the sky is definitely meant to parallel the image of Adam reaching up to God. Symbolically, there is the obvious Catholic symbolism, half of which is aesthetic. The other half is aesthetic, with loose implications. Like Shinji holding onto a cross necklace isn't him holding onto God, it's him holding onto Misato. And like, yeah, look at that, guys, Shinji's sitting in parking space 666, implying he's the devil. But let's just ignore the Catholic symbolism for a second, like seriously dude? How about instead we analyze the meaning behind a few of these here shots real quick? Like here in the opening, to an unattentive viewer this might seem like a very odd start to the film, but let's break it down. First of all, he's standing by the lake where he met Kaoru, as well as the location where Rei's Eva self-destructed. Now on the one hand we can interpret this as Shinji thinking about the past and about those he cared about and lost, and probably about how it was all his fault. But in a really subtle way, this is actually a subtle rhyming shot to a later part of the film, where Shinji's standing over the Sea of LCL and speaking to Kaoru and Rei. Death, and likewise suicide, is one of the only ways he could see himself spiritually reuniting with them, so in that sense, they're surprisingly similar. Oh shit, I got ahead of myself there. Did the implication that Shinji was trying to kill himself register there? I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't, this goes by very fast. Remember that Shinji can't swim? It's a pretty subtle character detail, so then why is his hair wet? It doesn't rain in the post-Second Impact world, so there's only one conclusion we can draw. Like the bucket that plops into the water to hammer in what just happened, Shinji probably tried to kill himself back here. But considering he's Shinji, he got scared and ran away. The little bitch wants to die, but he's too scared to take his own life. In this shot, we deliberately avoid showing Gendo's face, as in this moment he's completely stoic. He feels no emotion or pity for all the other people currently being slaughtered. He only cares for his objective, which he'd happily sacrifice everything for. Flip of the coin, it's pretty funny that if you look closely you can see the mass production Eva squishing a soldier helping his buddy up. But then again, if we step back and look at this from the perspective of visual symbolism, this actually establishes a very clear sense of power. Asuka having dispatched the JSTF with relative ease, the scale of the mass production Eva juxtaposed with it literally clobbering her previous opponent with its strength and size, shows us that this fight isn't going to be easy. These two are sort of editing-centric symbolism. Similar to the bucket plopping into the water being representative of what Shinji tried to do, on the line, the will of she who chose to remain within Eva, it cuts to Rei. Rei being the only living link to Yui Ikari, this is supposed to not so much imply that it's her own will within the Eva, but the will of her own original body, Yui. It can also be affirmed that Gendo is thinking about Rei from this cut. The same way Gendo's destroyed glasses represent Rei's feelings towards him. Same kind of cutting implication happens when Shinji's lying in bed. As he sits here, we suddenly cut back to the explosion site, implying he's thinking about Rei, and about companionship. Now to go back to talking about editing again without the use of symbolism, the sound cutting out once Shinji sees Asuka's mangled and devoured corpse is done perfectly, only cutting back into the sound of his voice, gasping, and then to him screaming. The wind building up as we get further and further away until it eventually overpowers the very sound of his voice. The use of limited sound here really makes this moment sink in and feel super chilling, until we get the credits, which are in the middle of the movie. Why? Because this is our intermission, you silly little bitch. Take some time to piss, and talk to your friends about what you just saw. It also allows the movie to cut the silence and then end abruptly at the end, which is very striking and punchy. Again with the Kubrickian aspect, this feels like Anno doing an homage to 2001 A Space Odyssey. I actually had the benefit of seeing a 75mm remake of Space Odyssey in theaters, and basically had that same experience. Left the theater, took a piss, and then prepared for the mindfuck of a second half this movie had in store for us. Same thing with Eva, as the second half of this movie is an amazing introspective journey into Shinji's psyche. Oh yeah. Shinji. I think it's time we address the elephant in the room and talk about our objectively awful protagonist. Yes, objectively. Absolutely objectively. Shinji completely sucks. He's sort of similar to Shoya, Bill, Matt, and maybe not Perry, but he's similar to all of them in that he isn't really a hero, not in a traditional sense, and at the same time he's a character we're supposed to relate to and project ourselves onto. If you don't know who the other characters I just named are, watch my other fucking videos, you bastard. Now, anybody with a high school diploma that's forced to analyze stuff like Catcher in the Rye could easily tell you that prior definition of Shinji. But let's actually take a look at his overall character arc as a hero. Now, typically, the ideal protagonist will start as wide-eyed, naive, and maybe a little bit whiny, maybe a little bit cocky. But they get their shit kicked in a few times for being too cocky, train, and then come back stronger than ever. It's a time-tested tale that if done well enough, everyone can enjoy. The experience of Rocky, Luke, Simone, Deku. The list goes on. Evangelion is unique in being a deconstruction of the typical mecha anime, which revels in this sort of character arc. If we actually look at Shinji's character progression, he starts off pretty damn low. He gets a very mild improvement, and then he kind of pitters out for the majority of the show. He's a fairly competent pilot. He has friends. And it seems like he has the approval of his father. He's happy. But in episode 16, he gets told he's cool and he decides to overextend. And he ends up getting his shit wrecked for aiming higher than he's actually capable of. And now with no other option, he's left to die. Only able to survive because his will to live and see everyone else again was able to awaken the strength of Unit 1. This is also my favorite episode. It's interesting because in any other show, this would be the setup for him to now come back stronger than ever. He's had his shit wrecked, and a conventional character arc tells us he'll train to get stronger. Nope, he's still pretty stagnant. Only difference is that now he's been put in his place. When an infected Eva unit comes face to face with him, Shinji chooses to die over having to take the life of its pilot. Another kid. Another human kid. Just like him. Request refused. His father activates a failsafe mode that brutally incapacitates that Eva, the pilot turning out to be his friend Toji. Furious from that, Shinji rebels against his father, deciding he should have never allowed himself to submit to him to begin with. Until later in the episode, an angel attack has Wayne nerfed down to a completely defenseless position. Kaji finally lays it out to Shinji that under no uncertain terms, that angel's gonna roll into Nerve, make contact with Lilith, and cause third impact. Killing everyone. Fuck that. Shinji charges back the Nerve, yells at his dad, and clocks that bitch. And hell, he's doing super well. We're starting to see a result of that character arc. Hey, look, he's almost taking an adrenal pleasure from it. That's our little sadist. Oh shit, his battery died. That's okay though, you're piloting a vicious monster and it's gonna fucking eat the angel that tried to kill you. In the next two altercations, Shinji's not actually allowed to fight due to this. Having the DNA of both Lilith and Adam in it, Unit 1 is too valuable. Asuka's allowed to be mentally raped and traumatized, Shinji not even being permitted to help. Rei is pushed to the brink of a straight up fusion with an angel until Shinji's allowed to do all he can. And considering all he can includes shoot it, punch it, or stab it, he exhausted all of his possibilities pretty quickly. Rei instead decides to take the angel into herself and then kill herself with it inside of her. Did I mention that Misato's cracking under trauma right now? She projected her father onto her former lover Kaji.
He's dead now.
So she's ended up creating a very large distance between herself and everyone but this one colleague who's giving her information because he low-key wants to fuck her. AKA Misato's actually sort of manipulating him. So Rei's dead, well the Rei Shinji knew is dead and replaced by a soulless husk. Toji's in the hospital, and Shinji's not on speaking terms with the other kids at his school because of that. Asuka's dead inside, because without Eva she feels worthless. Shinji realized a lot of things about Misato he doesn't like, and now she's kind of scaring him. And it's in this extreme loneliness and isolation that Shinji meets Kaoru, someone who loves him unconditionally. Sorry dude, he's an angel, gonna have to pop his head off. So by end of Eva, Shinji's like, fuck life, fuck my dad, fuck making friends, I tried, damn it. I can't find happiness. I do terrible things to people. I just deserve to die. Just let me die. But he's too afraid to kill himself. He seeks solace in a comatose Asuka. This won't give him anything. And what might seem to the audience as a traditionally heartwarming scene is actually one of selfishness and desire. Asuka needs to live for the narcissistic benefit of Shinji's. Not because she actually matters at all, because Shinji just wants someone to help him, to give him a reason to live. And after accidentally revealing her breast, he's driven to instinct and pleasures himself in an extremely vapid, selfish, and disgusting act. To say I'm so fucked up is an understatement. To call him a hero would be a lie. But unfortunately, to call him sympathetic, even through all this, is a bitter truth. Sympathetic. Not empathetic. I want to really stress that. Empathy would be really fucked up here. Asuka's unresponsive, devoid. She's a mere representation of a relationship with a human being. A jail brew or Rule 34 search away from an absolutely useless and futile feeling. A wasteful and passionless act. Because all of you disgusting, shut-in, nerd-ass otaku who masturbate to images of a 14-year-old girl are just as bad as this piece of shit seeking some form of human connection from something he'll never get it back from. JK dude, he jerked off. It's wicked funny because I'm like 13 and shit. You want to go watch the Cat in the Hat movie?
I've been masturbating to hentai because I'm lonely and unable to connect with real people.
Gross.
I should also note this is what Anno's trying to say, not me. This is our hero. This is someone who's given up on life because life seems deliberately written to knock him down at every turn. In Shinji's case, it pretty much is. Seele's ancient inscriptions, the Dead Sea Scrolls, require a very specific sequence of events to actualize their plan. And whilst piloting a medium between God and humanity, Shinji is able to decide the fate of humanity. His wish, in a world where no one accepts him, is shit to him, so they can all just die. They don't care about him, so they can all just die. The woman he tried to reach out to never loved him, so they can all just die. No one tries to help him, so they can all just die. Fuck this world, fuck everyone. I'm going to die and take all of them with me. This is our protagonist, and he is the embodiment of every single aspect of yourself. Yes, yourself. That you've decided to change for the benefit of yourself. And for that reason, seeing an extremely shitty version of you kind of fucking sucks. And Shinji kind of fucking sucks. Hell, maybe he's even a reflection of you. Maybe you spent the whole show calling him relatable until you hit End of Eva. Don't be like this. Don't be like Shinji. Just because things get hard doesn't mean you have the right to throw it all away. Because even though you might have it rough and have given up on life, that barrier of life, that is your physical form, is what makes you unique. And you should work to the betterment of yourself for the sake of your own happiness and no one else's. Or else you'll find yourself washed along in a sea of souls, giving into desire and drifting aimlessly, only to then be washed up onto an empty beach by the very same sea, alone, left only with the manifestations of those that antagonized you, haunted by your pessimism. But no matter what you do, you're still too pathetic to take action against them. Like, fuck dude, you probably should have just started by like, I don't know, talking to her? Like, I know she was a complete bitch to you, but like, come on, one step at a time, aight? So going back to the whole character arc thing, how does it feel to be back at square one? Only now square one isn't a negative fucking integer. Well, depending on the person, it's either sad, annoying, or confusing. And that's the main reason why Shinji, Evangelion, is so polarizing. It's this poor fucking kid who can't do anything right because God literally hates him. And that's about half the message that End of Eva is trying to convey. So with that all said, I'd like to pause for a minute here, for an intermission. Like the film itself, you need to take the time to process everything and prepare for what's to come. I'll be coming back to this movie in a month to cover the second half. I'm sort of inactive on my Patreon now due to my main job kind of taking priority, but if you like this and want to support me making more like this, then I'd really appreciate it. In the meantime, however, enjoy this 80s J-pop.